Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a fascinating journey into one of the most dramatic texts in ancient literature, the Book of Revelation. Now, usually when people approach these apocalyptic texts, they kind of treat them like a terrifying horror movie, right? Full of panic and dread. But today, we're actually transforming this source material into a clear, structured narrative. We're going to see how the famous seventh bowl judgment is actually a story of profound transition, justice, and ultimately, hope. Okay, let's dive right in. The source highlights this incredibly powerful, definitive declaration coming from the Temple of Heaven. It is done. I mean, think about the weight of that phrase. It marks the absolute end of man's rebellion ruling the earth. It's basically the announcement that the era of human kingdoms resisting divine authority has finally reached its conclusion. So it's not the end of existence. Actually, scratch that. It's really the definitive end of an old, broken era. And that brings us to a really crucial question. Does this text predict our doom or our deliverance? Because, let's be honest, it's incredibly easy to read these ancient prophecies and just feel pure fear. But today, we're completely reframing the narrative. By really digging into the context of the source material, we're going to see how this final judgment isn't just about destruction for the sake of destruction. No way. It actually sets the necessary stage for ultimate global restoration. So notice the specific target of this final event. The source notes that the seventh bowl is poured directly into the air. Now, in ancient scriptural context, the air isn't just about the oxygen we breathe. It's heavily connected to the domain of spiritual authority and evil influence. By striking the air, this event signals a massive top-down collapse. It's literally dismantling the very atmosphere of the worldly systems that have opposed the Creator. Section 1. A cosmic earthquake, shaking the foundations. Let's look at how this builds into an earthquake that the text describes as the greatest in all of human history. We're shifting from the atmosphere to the very foundations of the earth itself. And this brilliantly illustrates a vital historical pattern throughout the biblical narrative. Earthquakes aren't merely geological events here. They happen when the divine presence is made manifest. Think about it. Mount Sinai shook. The earth shook at the crucifixion and at the resurrection. So this final, unparalleled earthquake is presented as a cosmic reaction. It is creation itself groaning under the weight of human history, responding powerfully to the final manifestation of God's presence. Moving on to Section 2, the fall of Babylon, the collapse of human systems. Okay, so following that massive cosmic earthquake, the source describes the great city dividing into three parts, which leads to the global dismantling of a rebellious world order. The absolutely crucial point here is that Babylon represents way more than just a historical geographical location. The text is using it as an archetype. It's a completely self-obsessed system, a civilization intoxicated with power, greed, and pride. Basically, it's built on the arrogant, independent belief that humanity can save itself without any need for a creator whatsoever. And look at how this collapse actually happens. The source explains it as a totally natural progression. First, you have the rejection of God for human independence. Second, that turns into a culture obsessed with self and redefining truth. And third, the inevitable result, spiritual emptiness and collapse. You see, the text suggests that separation from the source of life naturally produces a sequence of destruction. It's not some act of cruel punishment. It's just the logical endpoint of a civilization that completely isolates itself from truth and love. Now, the scale of this transition is just staggering. The text notes that every island fled away and mountains were not found. I mean, the entire topography of the earth changes. And why? Well, because this isn't just about ending the old. It's about preparing the earth for a coming kingdom of righteousness. It's a literal and spiritual resetting of creation, completely wiping the slate clean and removing the temporary world system to make room for something entirely new. Section 3. The unrepentant human heart, the final plague.
As creation undergoes this massive reset, a final catastrophic judgment descends from the sky, and it reveals a deeply tragic truth about the condition of human nature. According to the text, massive hailstones fall from heaven. Each stone is described as weighing a talent. Now, to put that into perspective, our source notes that scholars estimate a talent to be an unimaginable 75 to 100 pounds. Just imagine hailstones the weight of a large dog falling from the sky. It's a picture of absolute, catastrophic judgment. But honestly, what happens next is what's truly shocking.
You know, we'd normally expect that if people just saw undeniable proof or a literal miracle, they'd automatically believe and change their ways, right? But the sad reality depicted in the text is quite different.
Despite this 100-pound hail, hardened human hearts still refuse to repent, and instead, they blaspheme. Much like the story of Pharaoh in Egypt, humanity reaches this final stage of rebellion where people would literally rather curse God than surrender. It proves a profound point. The deepest issue here isn't a lack of evidence, it's a hardened heart.
Now, sincere scholars and readers differ pretty heavily on how to interpret all of this. Some view these earthquakes and hailstones as literal, physical future events, while others see them as symbolic metaphors for the historical collapse of evil systems. But our source points out something really interesting. Whether you see this as a physical catastrophe or a historical metaphor, the impartial core message remains exactly the same. God ultimately defeats evil.
Section 4. A message of ultimate hope. The end of corruption.
And this brings us to what is probably the most important part of this entire explainer. We're pivoting from the collapse of the old world to a message of absolute ultimate hope. The seventh bowl is fundamentally not about destruction. It's about ending everything that destroys humanity. The source reveals this really beautiful sequence. You see, Revelation wasn't written to produce terror. It was written to bring comfort to those who are suffering. It shows us that after judgment comes renewal. After Babylon falls comes the New Jerusalem. After darkness comes light, and after sorrow comes restoration. It's the ultimate reassurance that the injustice, the deception, and the pain of human history have a definitive expiration date. Evil's time is strictly limited. This quote brilliantly anchors that hope. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The explainer reminds us that every earthly government, every economic system, and every single human culture will eventually fade. And because of this, the text is urging its readers not to tie their future, their peace, or their hope to the survival of Babylon, the temporary, flawed systems of this world. As we wrap up, I want to leave you with this really provocative thought, straight from the heart of our source material. Are you anchoring your identity in a falling system or an unshakable kingdom? The ultimate takeaway here is to stop reading these ancient apocalyptic texts looking for disasters to be afraid of, and start reading them looking for the eternal king who brings true redemption. Because when the shaking finally stops, what remains is righteousness, peace, and love. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the deeper meaning, and I'll see you next time.